Hello, it's Philip Taylor from Richmond Green Chambers speaking. Oh no, you think he's not on again about another EU book? Yes, I'm afraid I am. This is it here. It's this book. It's State Aid Law of the European Union, and it's written by two people, Peter L. Westerdorf and Mogens Ud Nielsen. It's by Sweet and Maxwell, and it's a learned tome, very much in keeping with what Sweet and Maxwell do. Standard chapter headings and paragraph numbers. Quite a lot of material, but very EU orientated material right at the front. Good contents and so on. And then at the back there's a useful index right at the end. So it's very much from the Sweet and Maxwell stable. Not a particularly big book, about 350 odd pages altogether. Let me tell you a little bit about it, because there's a Flickr reference there. It's on the internet, and I've given it the title Timely Reform of the EU's State Aid Laws. Now the question really is, what do we mean by all of this? Because that's the first starting point. Everybody always has problems with the EU. I certainly did when I was studying. I try to work out what it is they're talking about, because remember, you've got a language thing as well as the overall concepts of what policy is all about here. So let me first of all nail my proverbial colours to the mast and declare myself to be an enthusiastic European, although I'm UK born. I'm a supporter of the EU and an avid, if somewhat bemused, student of EU law, and have been for well over 20 odd years now, which, as it proliferates from year to year, appears to be growing as vast as the universe itself, if you don't mind me being so flippant. Perhaps all this explains then why, first dipping into this book, my eyes glazed over just a little bit, as they quite often do with EU books, especially textbooks. However, this is assuredly less the fault of the authors than the tortuous and tendentious nature of the legislation itself and the way it's drafted. And we can talk about that till the cows come home, basically, because there's still going to be problems with it. But we recognise that, and let's put our first step forward with what we do with state aid laws. It does reveal, this book, in my view, the mindset of any number of EU bureaucrats, obviously I'm referring to the Commission, whose ability to convert something relatively simple into a construct of Byzantine complexity has become legendary. But I digress here, because this is actually a very useful book. It's translated from the original Danish, and it provides, as far as I can tell, everything you need to know about EU state aid and EU state aid law as it currently stands. So if you're an EU bureaucrat, you'll love it. If you aren't, you probably won't. But you will nonetheless value it, in my view, as a definitive work in this complex area of law, and it's our money after all, so we've got to know what's going on. If you need clarification of what state aid is, you'll find it here, as long as you're happy with the elaborate explanation that's given, rather than a sort of succinct definition. So let me give you what they say. State aid is, say the authors, an objective term, but as discussed in, they mention various paragraphs, it's often difficult to determine whether an actual measure in fact constitutes aid. However, they go on to say, in principle, the Commission doesn't have any discretionary powers with regard to such a decision. The use of the market economy investor principle as a basis for determining whether aid exists is often connected with a complex economic assessment, very important of course at the moment, so that the ECJ is reluctant to apply its own assessment of whether aid exists in place of the Commission's assessment. You can see again, standard approach by the European Court here, which is what we do in our domestic courts, about a caution concerning how far they're going to go. Obviously when it comes to this is assessment of what the Commission's doing. So therefore now you know. Probably not the easiest thing to grasp, but I hope it at least assists you. I was grateful, of course, when I read this, that I already had read earlier in the text the examples of the different kinds of aid which you get, and obviously you can look in the book and see them. in what the authors reassuringly refer to as everyday language. Remember, it's being translated, so let's be reasonable. Ah, bless, as you say. Understanding is always more immediate when you give examples, which include environmental aid, investment aid, research and development aid, and so on. Most of the purposes listed for such aid are laudable, of course, and I'm sure we'll accept that, although one or two are controversial, including the one about supporting industry and commerce, quote, which is no longer competitive. Big issue at the moment with the downturn and the recession globally. So you can see the issues that Lord Mandelson might be dealing with, the next commissioner, now of course business secretary, and the position certainly perhaps within America about their approach to what we're doing here. It's a good question to consider here is the one that if one wonders how much aid is needed for a purpose like this and where the pecuniary support is actually meant to come from, we then have to start thinking about the way in which the whole issue is handled, and it's by far from settled in my view at the present time. But on balance, what the authors have done here is a commendable job with their thorough coverage of this unexpectedly complicated subject area as I see it, and they've amply succeeded in my view in their primary aim, which is expressed in the foreword when it says it's to provide the reader with a practical tool which can form the basis for or help solving most questions relating to what they call EC state aid law. It's obviously either EC, EU, depending on what you want to do. Indeed, therefore, my conclusion is it's a timely reminder of the reforms of our state aid law, and I think it's a very important book for the future. So thank you both to the authors, mention them again, Mr. Westerdorf and Mr. Nielsen. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.